Hi, Judge Andrew Napolitano here, and you are on Freedom Watch with my guest and colleague and good friend, former United States Ambassador to the United Nations, John Bolton. So, John, President Erdogan of Turkey is warning that Turkey would extend its military operations in Syria in such a way that they could potentially confront the United States, either directly or indirectly, because at the same time Turkish forces are fighting the Kurds that the U.S. has armed. Is Turkey our enemy or our friend?
Well, I think in this case, it would be a real confrontation with the United States and one that's unnecessary. But what it underlines is the reality that even after essentially eliminating the physical ISIS caliphate in Syria and Iraq, the situation on the ground is incredibly confused. There are a lot of parties to this conflict. It's always been a multi-party conflict, and in effect, the non-ISIS part of the conflict continues. And I'm afraid that both at the end of the Obama administration and so far in the Trump administration, we don't have an effective strategy to protect American interest and avoid exactly this kind of potential confrontation between Turkey, still a NATO ally, and Kurdish forces that we supported against ISIS.
What do we support the Kurdish forces doing, Ambassador?
Well, this is, I think, part of the inadequate strategy from Obama that, unfortunately, the Trump administration continued. We supported the Kurds. We supported the Iraqi government, largely a satellite of Iran, to defeat the ISIS caliphate. But what we didn't adequately recognize is that these particular Kurdish forces are allied with a Marxist Kurdish group inside Turkey that the Turkish government has been fighting for many years.
Wait a minute, you're telling me that we're arming a Marxist militia? Do we know that?
Well, they said they weren't Marxist and they were not really connected with the Turkish Kurds, the PKK as they're known. But the fact is, this is an indication of how complicated the circumstances were and how I don't think the original anti-ISIS strategy was well thought out. Now, that's all history now. But I think we've got to try and be much more assertive here, particularly with Turkey. Erdogan has played a very dangerous game. The United States needs Turkey as a loyal, pro-Western ally. But Erdogan is doing many, many things, this being one of them, to split Turkey off from NATO and turn it from being an ally, as it has been for many decades, into a potential adversary.
What would you advise Secretary Mattis, Secretary Tillerson, or even the President, he or they say or do with respect to President Erdogan?
Well, I think in the near term, we've got to say back off this particular attack. But that's really a short-term solution. It doesn't lead you anywhere beyond the first 24 hours of a ceasefire. I think with respect to Erdogan, which is the real concern here, I'm worried that he's trying to lay the groundwork for an Islamicist state in Turkey, overturning Kemal Ataturk's secular constitution. Erdogan once said when he was mayor of Istanbul, democracy is like a streetcar. You ride it to the stop you want, and then you get off. And I'm afraid he's getting off. So we've got to talk to the Turkish people as well as Erdogan and say, look, do you want to be part of NATO or not? We need to confront the reality. We can't pretend that Erdogan is pro-NATO when his actions are contrary to it. Now, in the bigger picture in the region, we don't have a post-ISIS caliphate strategy. And the result is we've got American forces in the region. Vice President Pence just spoke to him on his very successful trip out there. We're going to leave our troops and troops we've backed at risk of once again being drawn into a multi-party conflict unless we get our act together.
How realistic is it to expect that Turkey will become pro-West and NATO? They're practically an Islamist country already under Erdogan.
Yeah, look, Erdogan is a dangerous fact of life in Turkey. I honestly don't think the bulk of the Turkish population wants to leave NATO. I don't think they want to be adverse to the United States. But other opposition forces inside Turkey have not been effective. Erdogan has purged the judiciary of many secular judges. He's purged the military, of the secular generals and flag officers. So it's a very, very difficult situation inside Turkey, and unfortunately our friends in Europe, the other NATO allies, have not been willing to address this problem.
Ambassador, last question. I don't know if you can answer this. What side of the Syrian civil war is Turkey on?
They're on Turkey's side. They still want the Assad regime to go. That isn't going to happen. That's another byproduct of the Obama administration strategy. You now have a Russian-Iranian axis that runs from Iran through the Iraqi territory controlled by the Baghdad government, linking up with Assad in Syria and the Hezbollah terrorists in Lebanon. It's a very, very dangerous and unstable situation, and the United States, I regret to say again, does not have a strategy to deal with it. Now, dealing with it is going to be difficult and controversial, but we need to think through what our goals are, or our troops will be at risk.
Mr. Ambassador, it's always an education to chat with you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course, from New York, defending freedom whenever they let me, Judge Andrew Napolitano here. See you next time, America.